Hello everybody and welcome to today's video. We are going to be talking about game length today, and I know that that's something that I have discussed before, if not on my YouTube, then certainly on the website in the past, and I'm pretty vocal about it on social media as well. There is this sense with video games that short is a pejorative word to use to describe a video game, and I would challenge that. What inspired me to do this video is the release of Giraffe and Annika, which is the game that you're seeing on the screen in front of you. Giraffe and Annika is a really lovely, little, charming, sweet, innocent game. It's a mix of open world exploration, some kind of Zelda-like, but without the combat, dungeon design, and rhythm game. And together it's a really lovely package. I've given it 4 out of 5 on my website on digitallydownloaded.net, so you can go and read the review if you want more information about my thoughts on the game specifically. But when I looked at the other reviews of the game, the nearest score to mine on the Nintendo Switch, which is what I reviewed, was 55 out of 100 or 5.5 out of 10. And when I looked at through those reviews, the reasons that the game scored quite low with most critics, and I'm a bit of an outlier, the thing that keeps coming up is that this game is short. It takes about 4 to 5 hours to play through. You can maybe stretch it out to 8 if you try and do absolutely everything and get top scores in the rhythm game action and all that kind of stuff. You can stretch it out a little bit, but it is a very short game, and that's really undeniable. But that raised the question with me once again, why do we talk about short as being a pejorative in video games? Because it's only really in video games where short is an issue. If you look at pretty much any other form of art out there, there is a respect for brevity. And indeed, it's really kind of drummed into people right from the outset when they start their careers in creative writing or whatever, to have an efficiency about how you work. I remember doing courses on creative writing at university, and the first thing you learn is to really be efficient, be brief, get to the point, make the point, and then move on. Don't write around it. Don't use words that you don't need to. It's not just about respecting your audience's time, although that is part of it, but it's also about being able to maintain the integrity of the themes that you're trying to address. The more bloated your work gets, the more the themes and core message gets diluted by sheer density. And there are some books and films and whatever which of course are very long, and by necessity, like War and Peace for example, it wouldn't work as a shorter book, but War and Peace is only as long as it needs to be. It's not long for the sake of being long. It is long because it needs to get through a lot of work. You look at another book which is quite short, for example, Animal Farm. Animal Farm is a very short book. Animal Farm would not work if it was extended to the length of War and Peace. In fact, it would really dilute the messages of Animal Farm to make it longer. So, these are good examples of work that is efficient. It doesn't matter how long the end product is. What matters is how efficient it is at getting to that point. And the same goes for film. If you've got a romantic comedy, for example, it probably only needs to be 90 minutes long to get the point across, and that used to be the standard. But these days, you start to see more people trying to stretch the length of these films out, and it does actually compromise the integrity of those films. There are films that need to be long by nature. For example, Lawrence of Arabia really needed to be that kind of 4-hour epic in order to work, but again, it was only as long as it absolutely needed to be. It was not long for the sake of being long. Now we move over to video games, and in a lot of cases, video games are long for the sake of being long. And we always listen to the marketers talk about content. These games have so much content. They're unlimited content. And I've talked about content as a word in a previous video, and it's a dirty word that doesn't really extend the artistry of the video game. Content really just means stuff, and if you're not putting stuff in your games for a reason, then it doesn't need to be there. And unfortunately with video games, because there is that perception now that they need to be long, developers compete with one another to just keep shoving more stuff into their games. It doesn't matter what that stuff is in service of, it's just there. And as a result of that, a lot of games have a diluted message. They might have otherwise been very high quality narrative experiences, but because they're just stretched so thin, they're exhausting to play, and the message really gets lost underneath just the busy work and the nonsense that gets thrown in there for the sake of it. Now, that's not to say some video games don't need to be long. There are certainly games that really do need to have that kind of extended length to them, especially, you look at JRPGs or visual novels, they often have a lot of things to say. But even then, that doesn't mean there should be a standard. You shouldn't have to make a 100-hour JRPG. You shouldn't have to make a 40-hour visual novel. The visual novel should only be as long as it needs to be to get the core message across. It's not about just throwing words at a player so that they can get that time count up. And it's not about just throwing endings in to encourage replays and whatever. There needs to be a purpose for everything that's in the game. Which brings us back to Giraffe and Annika. I think Giraffe and Annika is exactly as long as it needs to be. Because it is that kind of low engagement in the sense of it doesn't try to be a difficult game. It doesn't try to challenge you. It's more about just enjoying the world and the experience and the characters and the narrative. It does all of that in its couple of hours length, and the charms of the thing would start to be lost if it was extended over a longer period of time. Because there is no combat in this thing and you're really just kind of running out of the way of the enemies like you're seeing on the screen here in front of you. If that was extended over more dungeons than there are in the game, then that would become quite boring. But as it is, it's enough to be interesting and vibrant, and for the developers to give you a couple of different ideas to experience, but never get kind of bogged down in content. Because the game is nice and brief, the characters can be just charming and simply drawn, which makes it quite appropriate for a younger audience. This game is an all ages game by any definition of the word, and it's just a really lovely little experience to play in between all the other things that you're doing. I think that, we've got, if you look at literature, we've got short stories, we've got poetry, we've got short plays, we've got short films. There is a space for that kind of short experience, and that doesn't necessarily, in those other spaces, people don't criticize them for being short. They generally kind of laud them and applaud them. Even in paintings, miniatures paintings, we're talking about the kind of little tiny paintings that you see sometimes. There is a respect for the art that goes into those and the challenge of working with a smaller canvas. And I think that we should be celebrating games like Giraffe and Annika rather than criticizing them, because they have the confidence to be a short experience and know their limits and respect the player, and most importantly, respect the actual art itself to know when to call it quits. Anyway, that's enough for this video. Let me know your thoughts as always in the comments. Would love to hear whether you enjoy short games or not. Please do like and subscribe, and please do consider backing me on Patreon so I can continue to expand what I'm doing with this channel. Thanks as always for watching. We have more coming, and we will see you soon.